4, 8, 15, 16, 23, 42. Yep, got it. Hey guys, what's up? And today I'm gonna do a review on the second season on one of my favorite TV shows of all time, Lost. Let's recap what happened on season 1. Beware of spoilers, of course, because it's really impossible to talk about Lost season 2 without spoiling season 1. So, Jack, Sawyer, Kate, Charlie, Locke, Sayid, and a lot of other people plane crashed onto an island. But the interesting part is, the island is just not any island. It's a magical island that makes you think you're insane because there are many weird things on the island. Boats and dead bodies that are probably 50 years old, polar bears, smoke monsters, cursed numbers, black and white stones, hatches, secret rooms, other survivors, and all sorts of weird, disturbing, mysterious things. Then they found this woman, Danielle, who also plane crashed onto the same island 16 years ago, and she said that there are still others that will come for them and kill them all. And Locke found a hatch underground, so the main characters, Jack, Kate, Locke, and Hurley, blew up the hatch so that people could hide inside in case the other people came and killed them, like Danielle said. So now we enter the first episode, Man of Science, Man of Faith. And wow, it is a magnificent season opener. Magnificent. Man, there are so much to look forward to and so much to be curious of on this episode. It's just curiosity and fear, but then curiosity took over fear, so you would rather explore what the hell's going on instead of staying in your position. So it's whew. And after the season 1 finale, after watching it, it feels like there is a hole in my body and I have to patch it immediately, because this is one of the greatest cliffhangers of all times. If it's not Mother's Mercy to the Red Woman or Gliding Overall to Blood Money, it's Exodus Part 2 to Man of Science, Man of Faith. It's such a great cliffhanger, and it ended in such an ambiguous, strange, and ominous ending. But the way this episode started is surprisingly lighthearted and fun, and it just defies expectations. And yeah, I'm talking about the teaser. It's amazing. I watched the teaser like 3-4 times, and I really, really love it. And instead of making the hatch a very dark and mysterious and weird place, it's actually a very nice, fun, and welcoming place. And overall, I think the episode is on point. It's kind of straightforward, and the way it transitioned from the last season to this season, it's very smooth. It really picked up where we last left off, and the ending is really, really cool, and I was really curious what would happen next. Moving on to episode 2, Adrift. The first episode of the season is usually just the intro, but what really actually happened lies on the second episode. So this time the story rewinded a little bit back and continued from the part where Sawyer, Mike, and Jin fell off the raft, blew up, and went missing, which I was really curious about. Again, the cliffhanger. Oh my gosh. And from the part where Locke enters the hatch. So this is basically the last episode, but in Sawyer, Mike's, and John Locke's perspective. But I thought Mike, Sawyer, and Jin will find a secret entrance or exit and teleport back to the island. I thought that would be pretty cool. But no, they were really planning to drift back to the island. And the last scene of the episode is frightening as... Then it's episode 3, Orientation. Last episode is more of a transitional episode for this one, while this one gives us more drama and questions. The character of Desmond is great. He's smart and faithful at the same time, while the character of Jack begins to be I guess, losing a little love because, you know, it's kind of mean to point a gun at someone simply because he thought that said someone is crazy. It's not that nice to do, you know. And we also get to learn more about the island, the electromagnetic fluctuation, and a new character, Ana Lucia, is introduced, played by Michelle Rodriguez, who is probably the most famous actress in the entire cast as of now. And the second most famous would probably Dominic Monaghan, because Lord of the Rings. But still, I enjoy this episode fairly, you know? It's a good one. Episode 4, Everybody Hates Hugo, is another slow episode that's a bit more mediocre compared to other exciting episodes. It's a really Hugo episode, and Rose too. Of course, seeing that much food in the first time in 40 something days, it's glorious, and the food is inside the hatch. And this episode really deals with Hugo and his food addiction problems. And of course, the characters are going to run into some food problems because of that. What's the most interesting thing, however, is what will happen to Michael, Jin, and Sawyer. While in the main plot, there's really not much to talk about, especially when Desmond is not there. Again, I don't want to say this too much, but Desmond is such a good character. A charismatic and mysterious but smart and tough man. And there's also a really happy ending for some reason. And I like how the episode ended. Instead of a corny happy ending, it's a legitimately satisfying happy ending. And it's satisfying in an emotional way. You can really see people laugh and smile, and you feel warm. And I think, yeah, I think that scene, that montage scene when Hurley was just eating all the food, it's pretty awesome. And I might also have a theory on why did the clock turn back to 108 minutes when the button was pushed. I kind of know why. At least I think I know why. It's because 4 plus 8 plus 15 plus 16 plus 23 plus 42 is 108. Simply that, but I still don't get why these numbers, you know. Over to episode 5, ... and found. The show is lost, and this is ... and found, so it's lost and found. Get it? Probably the most boring episode so far in the show, but it's not as bad, but it's still, you know, not that exciting. So Sun lost her wedding ring, it's missing, and that's it. That's the main storyline. But I don't really care for her wedding ring, not really. The most interesting thing about this episode, however, is the people that Mike, Jin, and Sawyer met, and they were all going back to Jack, Kate, and Locke, and the other people in the main group. And then Mike ran off to find Walt, so Jin and another African guy, Mr. Echo, by the way, looked for Mike before he was caught by the others, so once again, a great cliffhanger. Moving on to episode 6, Abandoned, where the story starts to get better again. Locke learned that Charlie took the statuette, which contains cocaine if you haven't watched season 1, and this problem is actually something that we care about because we care about Charlie. He's a good man with a bad habit. And then we see Boone once again in the flashbacks, which is pretty interesting. And the people with Michael, Jin, and Sawyer was also coming back to the main group. But now the weird hallucinations and visions you get from the island are back as well, which means more mystery, and I was really looking forward to that. Next is episode 7, The Other 48 Days, and it's a really special episode. I thought this episode might be literally a fast forward episode of what happened on the next 48 days, and I thought it's gonna be like Breaking Bad's 4 Days Out. But no, the other 48 days is actually the first 48 days on the island, but for the other survivors. In other words, it's basically the entire storyline of the show so far, except it's on the other survivors' perspective. And damn, the writers have to fit an entire season 1 and 6 episodes of content into one single episode. That's why there are a lot of scenes, but it still doesn't feel jumpy or choppy at all. It still feels smooth, cohesive, and I think that's great. And I really like how the last 2 days of the 48 days are basically snippets of moments that we already saw previously in season 2, and they make it, in slow motion, so it's like flashes of memories. I think that's a pretty cool touch. And I kind of get why did Mr. Echo not say anything for 40 days. It's because he killed someone. Minor spoiler alert. He killed someone, and he's a religious person, and killing someone is not a right thing to do, so to punish himself, he didn't talk for 40 days. Yeah, overall, I think this is a really special episode. The way things started and continued and ended, it's all just very cohesive, and it's an oddball in the episode list, but I still love it. Then the story progresses on to episode 8, Collision. So Ana Lucia got Sayid and tied him up while Jack was trying to heal Sawyer. And wow, the killing has actually begun. The show will suddenly kill any character where we least expect. And the last scene is really emotional. It's another really satisfying, happy ending. In slow motion as all the survivors reunited, surprised to see each other, running towards them, hugging them, smiling, while the strings in the background sort of play along. It's a very powerful ending scene. And the episode. This episode is actually way better than I've expected. Then it's episode 9, What Kate Did, which brings back the good old mystery in Lost. More hallucinations, ghosts, and spooky coincidences. And we get to know more about Kate because, the episode title, pretty self-explanatory, and it's actually pretty interesting. And in one of the flashbacks from Kate, she went into a cafe, and we see this woman, probably a waitress, but she was actually, oh yeah, I'm not gonna spoil it, but it's another crazy coincidence thing. I don't know, but for some reason I really, really, really wanted to see a fight between Kate and Ana Lucia. That would be like a tournament between the strong women of Lost. It would be really, really entertaining. And overall, it's a pretty nice episode. It's interesting. The Japanese doctor in the film is actually really creepy, and the incident he kept talking about still keeps us confused in a disturbing way. And I don't want to give too much spoilers again, but there's, basically they found a film, a tape, and then inside the tape there was this Japanese doctor, professor, and we're moving on to the next episode. Remember the old plane that crashed onto the forest with the Nigerian priests that carry guns and Saint Maria statuettes that contains heroin, or was it cocaine? I forgot. Well, we got some answers. This is episode 10, the 23rd Psalm, and it's a great episode. There is finally an answer to an early season 1 mystery. And the answer isn't underwhelming nor exaggerated, but the answer is actually surprisingly realistic. But still, it's very interesting and dramatic as well. And, you know what? I'm giving a spoiler alert. Apparently everything about the plane, the priests, and the statuettes are there. They exist simply because of Mr. Echo. Shocking, right? It's Mr. Echo's idea to hide heroin inside the Saint Maria statuettes and fly it all over the world. But the plane somehow landed on the island and all the bodies decayed. Now this island is more like Mr. Echo's island because the island have never related to a character that much. And also the Japanese doctor in the film said that the computer must not be used for communication. And then on the next scene, we see Mike chatting to some stranger on the computer, and I was like, no, Mike, don't do it, don't. Yellow. White. Moving on to episode 11, The Hunting Party. which is basically Michael ran off to look for Walt again, so Jack, Locke, and Sawyer looked for Michael. Then they also ran into the others, which is something that I look forward to, and we see more flashbacks about Jack. A couple of surprising moments. The plot is fairly interesting. There's not much to say about this episode, but we get to learn more about the others, and that's really cool. And it's not a bad episode at all. Up next is episode 12, Fire plus Water. Woo-hoo! We're finally halfway there. Wow, it's taking a lot of time. This review is probably going to be half an hour long, or maybe even longer. Yeah, it's probably going to be even longer. Anyways, according to the ratings of IMDb, this episode is rated 7.4 when I watched it, and it's not that good compared to other episodes. It's ridiculously low for a last episode. So if it's that low, I deduce that it's not because of how boring the story is, it's because something's wrong with the plot. So on this controversial episode, Charlie was worried about Claire and Aaron's safety, and he started to have these weird dreams. The most ridiculous dream is the one where Claire and Charlie's mom were dressed as angels, telling Charlie that he must save Aaron. It looks hideous and disturbing at the same time. So Charlie tried his best to baptize the baby, but every time Claire finds out and everyone hates Charlie. Charlie was just trying to help and nobody believes him except for Mr. Echo. You know, I feel bad for Charlie a lot on this episode. However, what irritates me on this episode isn't the plot nor the pace. It's John Locke. He was supposed to be a nice and peaceful guy, and all of a sudden he's a dick to Charlie. The story might be a little ridiculous, a little off the handles, and a little weird, but it's actually not that bad. And I like the character of Charlie, once again. And I still like John Locke, but not as much as before. Then it's episode 13, The Long Con, an unpredictable and cool little standalone episode that focuses on Sawyer. So there's like 2 plot twists in this episode, and I don't want to spoil it. Yellow. White again. Spoiler alert. So basically, someone attacked Sun and everyone thought it's the others. So Jin wanted to get guns to protect Sun, but Sawyer believed that Ana Lucia actually did this so that she could get the guns. So he told Locke to hide the guns. And at the end, there's a big plot twist. This is all an elaborate play made by Sawyer. He conned everyone, and even more surprisingly, that it's his collaborate effort with Charlie, which is still a character that I root for since the previous episode, but I mean, it's just kind of surprising that Charlie was in on this as well. And the writers on this episode, they're actually, I mean, you can really see that they're actually smart, and it's really well thought out how they, write the plot for this episode. Although this episode is not that mysterious or interesting or strange, the plot twists, they are fulfilling, and it's like The Usual Suspects, but crammed into 45 minutes, and on an island. So, well done. The story progresses on to episode 14, One of Them, which is another great episode from the season that took a bold step to expand the plot. So Danielle found this man in the jungle and he's trapped and tied up. So Sayid freed him and interrogated him in case he's really one of the others. Without watching the episode, I already know he's played by Michael Emerson, who's nominated for a lot of Emmys for his performance on the show. And no kidding, he's actually great. His acting is actually really great. But anyway, it's still really difficult to spot a lie from him, and it's hard to tell if he's telling the truth or not. And another thing about this episode that intrigues me a lot is we get a glimpse of what it's like at first when the button was not pushed at the right time. Locke didn't push the button in time, and it hit 0 before the button is pushed. And according to the Japanese doctor, an incident will happen. And we see the clock doing weird things and turning into petroglyphs for a second. It was a bit disturbing and ominous, and I really want to know what's the incident. Over to episode 15, Maternity Leave. A really self-explanatory and fitting title for the plot on this episode. So Aaron, the baby, got sick and Claire thought he's infected with the disease that everybody's talking about, so she decided to set off to wherever she went last season and look for the vaccines. The writer of the show knew that they must somehow expand the plot and continue with the Others storyline, and they really accomplished this by using two separate storylines. One concerning Henry Gale, the other one concerning Claire's baby, Aaron. One is more suspicious and the other one is more mysterious. And it's a pretty special episode too, since all the flashbacks on this episode are not what happened before the plane crash, but, when Claire was missing. However, what I think should be explored more on this episode is the place Claire, Kate, and Danielle went to. There could have been more clues that led to more questions, but overall it's still a really nice episode. A lot of questions are answered. Then it's episode 16, The Whole Truth. This episode mainly revolves around the relationship between Jin and Sun again, which is actually quite uninteresting. Although I really like a scene where the show shows us that Jin couldn't understand a single word from Sawyer and Bernard, and they were speaking in English, and to show that Jin doesn't understand English, the vocals, the voices, they are in reverse. But in the more interesting side, Ana Lucia, Saeed, and Charlie wanted to find the balloon that Henry was talking about in order to prove that Henry isn't one of the others. And I really like how there's a tension between Jack and Locke on who should be the boss. And overall, it's a fairly decent episode with a mysterious ending. Moving on to episode 17, Lockdown, which is a surprisingly great episode. And in my opinion, it's the best episode since Man of Science, Man of Faith. So the Hatch and Henry Gale had been the two most important things in the show. That leads to many more clues and drama. And I really love how the things that happened in the show concerning the Hatch will be of some use in later episodes. And once again, I'm giving a spoiler alert. Then it's episode 16, The Whole Truth. This episode mainly revolves around the relationship between Jin and Sun again, which is actually quite uninteresting. Although I really like a scene where the show shows us that Jin couldn't understand a single word from Sawyer and Bernard, and they were speaking in English, and to show that Jin doesn't understand English, the vocals, the voices, they are in reverse. But in the more interesting side, Ana Lucia, Saeed, and Charlie wanted to find the balloon that Henry was talking about in order to prove that Henry isn't one of the others. And I really like how there's a tension between Jack and Locke on who should be the boss. And overall, it's a fairly decent episode with a mysterious ending. Moving on to episode 17, Lockdown, which is a surprisingly great episode. And in my opinion, it's the best episode since Man of Science, Man of Faith. So the Hatch and Henry Gale had been the two most important things in the show. That leads to many more clues and drama. And I really love how the things that happened in the show concerning the Hatch will be of some use in later episodes. And once again, I'm giving a spoiler alert. Everyone at this point wondered what would happen if you don't push the button in time. A couple of episodes ago, we see how the numbers on the clock change into petroglyphs, which is disturbingly interesting. This time we get to see what happens in the inside. First, there was a lockdown and doors came down, which is, again, completely defies my expectation, and Locke and Henry Gale were trapped. Then the alarm started beeping and Locke was stuck underneath a door, injured. So Henry Gale pushed the button after it hits 0, and there were hidden markings on the door that showed up. After the button was pushed, everything was fine again, except we will later realize that Henry Gale was actually not Henry Gale. But if there's one thing that bothered me is, the fact that Locke and Henry Gale didn't go to the vents in the first place, instead of trying to go underneath the door. But still, great episode. Really interesting episode. Next is episode 18, Dave, which focuses on Hurley. with some really unpredictable and questionable plot twists. So basically, Libby wanted Hurley to lose weight and help him with his eating disorder, but then Hurley started to hallucinate and he saw a man and his name is Dave. So Hurley came to a conclusion that Dave wasn't there. It was just a hallucination, like the horse that Kate and Sawyer saw, like Jack's dad who Jack saw, like Walt who Shannon saw, and Boone that Locke saw. But there are more layers to the story as we peel back and start to understand Hurley's origins. We never really asked how did Hurley meet Leonard, who was the guy who first mentioned the numbers. And once again, I can't talk about this episode without giving a spoiler alert. I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. So now we know that Hurley was in the mental hospital before getting work and winning a lottery. That's where he met Leonard and Dave. Then we realized that Dave doesn't exist before the plane crashed, and that's when the plot hooked me in. Then in the present day, Dave showed up again and told Hurley about how everything was just his imagination, the island, the people, yada yada, and it was really confusing, but in an entertaining way. Then we realized that Libby was also in the same hospital, and when I saw that, I was like, what the hell? Then how? Wait. And, yeah, still, this episode answered a lot of questions, and again, made us ask even more questions. And, the character development of Hurley is great. Then the story progresses on to episode 19, S.O.S. You know, I hate to break it to you, but this is the most uninteresting episode in the series so far. This episode centers on Rose and Bernard, but their story ain't that significant to the plot. Their story is pretty unrelatable and uninteresting. The only thing that I'm interested about on this episode is what Jack wanted to do with Henry and what will happen to Jack and Kate. But on this episode, we also learn more about the healing powers of the island, but this is probably just a filler storyline. Then it's 2 for the road. Why does it look like my mouth is... It turns out my mouth was actually bleeding. Speaking of bleeding, 2 for the road is the next episode. Shit. So this is an Ana Lucia centered episode, and the last scene is so unbelievable and devastating. And that's pretty much the extent of what I'm able to say without giving a spoiler a lot. Ana Lucia actually has connections with Christian, Jack's dad, and that was surprising. B, the ending scene. Wow. You know, this scene actually pissed a lot of the fans off, but a majority of the fans liked it, even though it's devastating. Ana Lucia stole Sawyer's gun so that she could kill Henry. Henry, quote-to-quote Henry, but she couldn't do it, so she gave Michael the gun, and Michael suddenly shot Ana Lucia with the gun. Then he shot Libby. Twice. Then he went to the room and shot himself. Instead of shooting Henry, I have no idea what's going on, but Ana Lucia's dead? I mean, I know, like, Michelle Rodriguez had to, film other projects, like Fast and Furious and all that, and they have to kill her off, but damn, that's it. There's nothing more to her character, and that's just such a crazy turn of events. And Jack would never learn that Ana Lucia knew his father, and Hurley would probably never know that Libby was in the same mental hospital with him, so that's a shame. Next is episode 22, question mark, which doesn't actually say question mark, but in the title it was literally a question mark. So Echo had this weird dream and somebody told Echo to ask John to show him the question mark, which is something that showed up on the episode Lockdown. And I really liked how Echo was telling John to do things like fire plus water, Echo was supporting Charlie's dream, but John didn't agree with Charlie. So it's good to see how Echo sort of, told John about the dreams and all. But what Echo and John found later on the episode was actually really cool, and it answered a lot of questions, but made us ask even more questions once again. And something sad also happened on Jack's storyline, and I really hope Libby would tell everyone who actually did it, if you know what I mean, but I'm not gonna talk further. Moving on to episode 23, 3 minutes. Again, this episode doesn't feature flashbacks before the plane crash, but in order to escalate the tension to compel the story for the finale, this episode featured flashbacks of Mike trying to find Walt. I really appreciate the writing on the episode. It makes us question the others even more by defying our expectations hardcore. What are they doing? Why are they here? What the hell? Who the hell are they? And I also like how this episode tried to recover what happened on Fire Plus Water. Charlie impressed Locke and gained Claire's trust instantly, which is still fine because if the story focuses on Charlie too much, it will get annoying, but a little bit of Charlie doesn't hurt. And it's a pretty nice episode with another disturbingly ambiguous ending, and I can't wait to watch the 1.5 hour long finale, which is episode 24, Live Together, Die Alone. Oh my gosh. Even though it's not as great as the season 1 ending, this ending is still really, really, really amazing. Oh my gosh. It's more action-packed. It is more branched. It is more, I guess, more realistic instead of mysterious or ominous. And this episode also mainly revolves around the others and the button, two of the main components of Lost Season 2. And man, this episode, again, defies expectation and turns its plot to new directions that we would never have expected. So, spoiler alert. So this episode had two storylines mainly. The main storyline was basically Michael taking Jack, Kate, Sawyer, and Hurley to the others, while Jack had Sayid, Jin, and Sun backing them up. And the sub-storyline was basically John wanted to see what happens if the button wasn't pushed, so he and Desmond planned to lock Echo out so that they would occupy the computer room and wait for the clock to count down to 0. So Echo called Charlie to help him get back to the hatch by blasting the blast door open with dynamite, which failed. The door didn't open and Echo was seriously injured. When I first saw the button in Lost, I already knew that one day this whole button thing would not be, I guess, the button would not be pushed anymore. And really, this is the episode when the button is not pushed. Although this season finale is not as exciting as Exodus of Season 1, this is an amazing finale still. Both storylines are really interesting and entertaining, and I'm glad that Desmond was back. I hope Desmond didn't die from that discharge. I also hope that Echo didn't die from that explosion, because Echo was the best character amongst all of the other tail section survivors. The problem in this episode, however, this episode, it's amazing, but there is one flaw, and that is the sub-storyline even better than the main storyline. It's even more interesting and mind-boggling, and it makes me more curious. And the scene where the others took Jack, Kate, and Sawyer was slightly predictable, but still, I was really interested on what's going to happen next. Also, the others, the quote-unquote others, are actually lamer than we thought, especially when Ben asked Tom where was his beard, and he was like, yeah, they already know about it. What intrigues me even more is what would happen to the hatch. At last, John broke the computer, and things really did happen. John was wrong. So the only way to stop this electromagnetic disaster is the failsafe. The failsafe triggered the discharge, and the discharge turned the entire sky into intense brightness. And that's the most shocking scene of the entire season. Now I'm a bit disappointed at John Locke, and I think I like Charlie a bit more. And this episode also answered the first question we all asked when we first watched Lost. Why did the plane crash? Why did the plane crash happen? Apparently, Desmond forgot to push the button, and the island sucked the plane magnetically, attracted the plane. And it's also a cool thing that the title Live Together, Die Alone is sort of parallel to Man of Science, Man of Faith. So far, only 2 episodes are better than this one. Pilot, both parts, and Exodus, both parts. Overall, Season 2, it's admittedly not as good as Season 1, but it still has a lot of amazing storylines, amazing scenes, and amazing episodes. The reason why it's not as good as Season 1 is because there's more answers than questions. This season mainly focuses on the Hatch, aka the Dharma Initiative Station, and the others, the quote-to-quote others. We get to know a few more characters like Ana Lucia, Libby, Echo, Desmond, and some of the others. There are some more shocking character deaths and entertaining action sequences, more strange and disturbing scenes too. The acting performance is also better than I thought. Terry O'Quinn, who plays John Locke, is great. Michael Emerson, who plays Henry Gale, or, I'm not going to tell you. They're both great, they're both nominated for Emmys. And on this season, the island didn't play too much of a role, but the characters, they are more important. They hold a higher place. But still, amazing season. Amazing season full of twists and turns. The worst is episode 19, S.O.S, and the best is the season finale, Live Together, Die Alone. I am saying Lost Season 2 is mind-blowing, and I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. So, have you watched Lost Season 2? From 1 to 10, how much would you rate it? Like if you like it, and subscribe if you want more. And it's 12:46 in the morning. And on my hand right now is a strawberry and cream flavored lollipop.